guys. Final topic, as always, is a whole smorgasbord of questions from the audience. These are not Patreon. These are from kindoffunny.com/forums. So go there, leave your topic. We'll get to it. It's going to be a fun time. Just like Dan Phillips did. He wants to know, what game magazines did we grow up reading and have a subscription to?
EGM. Electronic Gaming Monthly was it for me, man. Like I had Game Informer too, obviously when they made their deals with EB at the time. I picked up Game Pro. That was like the gross, the supermarkets one where I'd page through it and then ask mom if I could get it. But EGM was the one that I subscribed to straight up and was with forever. You know what I mean? Until it ran out, until it was over. And like that's my stories always go back. I always talk about the fact that in 4th grade I had the Game Pro and that's when it all dawned on me. But like the review crew of Shu and Che and stuff like that, like that was the one those were my like idols growing up. You know what I mean? And like to the point that like obviously I always tell the story of like there's only been 2 times in my life when I couldn't stop talking. Number 2 was when I met Shu for the first time when I was working at IGN and just unloaded on him at a holiday party how like he changed my life and all that stuff. And he's like, cool, and like backed away and like left. But like even like that, and that was like year 1 of IGN. And then last year at RTX, I ran into Che for the first time at Torchy's Tacos, and we sat down. And I was playing it cool, and I was fine. And I'm like, by the way, you totally changed my life too.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, don't say that.
I remember when he said his name. Like that was one of those things where I was like, I've never met a Che before.
Yeah.
And then I looked at him like, oh my God, it's him.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if that sounds weird. I mean, it probably sounds weird to the younger people now who there's so many games personalities, right? But like, EGM was the one that had like, we are showing you their face, here's the information about them, and here's what they're playing right now, and here's a little anecdote.
And it made him characters. I think that's kind of the most important thing is like, Sushi X. And,
Sushi X.
And what's his name? Sean Baby.
Sean Baby.
And all that stuff. It's like they were the ones that were really kind of making this a pop culture thing where it's like the act of reviewing the games and the people reviewing the games were people, characters, things, like that you could latch onto. And I think that was really the start of, at least that I remember, of latching onto people and wanting to know their opinions.
Exactly. And you'd come through and you'd see like, okay, Shu likes games X, Y, and Z, and Shane likes this, and this. And you'd go to the review, and there'd be differences in their scores, and you could do the thing of like, oh, that's cool, but I agree more with Shu's favorite games right now, so that's why his opinion is weighted more to mean more for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, again, I know that sounds so pedestrian now, obviously, right? There's 15,000 reviewers everywhere, so if Colin says something, but Jim says something, but I say something that it's whatever. It's everyone's opinion on everything. Everybody so well, but that was so groundbreaking at the time. You know what I mean? Let alone the fact of how thick those magazines used to be.
Oh my God!
The December issue every year that's 248 pages and like lots of ads, but lots of information on all these different games.
Yeah,
and then you get your E3 one, afterwards, and you see all these photos and all. And
that was it. Like that's how you got your E3 information, and it was just like I'll never forget seeing the issue of EGM after the E3 where they announced Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, and Wind Waker.
Yeah,
and all 3 of them were on the cover, and I was like, shut up.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
And but yeah, EGM's definitely my answer. That is the one that I loved the most, but I went in on all of them, man.
Really?
Like, Game Pro and PSM were my low rung ones that I didn't need to read every month.
Cover stories. What's the cover story?
Yeah, exactly.
Page 2,
we'll see. But official PlayStation magazine, that demo disc, that was such a big thing. That was so expensive and I couldn't get it every month. But because the demo disc, that was an experience in itself.
That's such a great idea.
You need to have. And then once I got my Xbox, there was the, I forgot what it was called, but official Xbox magazine. That was all right. But then, of course, Nintendo Power.
Yeah, did you do Nintendo Power?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was a Sega kid, right? So
I was
Sega
a
Power.
Nintendo kid. So it's Nintendo Power to me was like, I'll never forget. The reason I know about Pokemon was Nintendo Power.
Yeah.
Had this little comic book that was like the first issue or the first episode of the Pokemon cartoon, but in comic book form.
Sure.
And it also was like a strategy guide for like the first whatever, like gym or whatever. And I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
I need it. And that's the power of those magazines.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember them. And when I moved, I had to throw my collection out. And it was heartbreaking, but I went through issue by issue of all my Nintendo Powers, all my EGMs, all my Game Informer, everything.
Yeah.
And if I looked at it, and it resonated with me, I kept it.
Yeah.
So I have a box full of like the most important issues to me.
That's why I still have it on the bookshelf. I think it is that my PlayStation 2 launch edition
of
EGM.
That blue cover and that was a thick issue,
because it was like they had it was like the most like EGM like on point with everything, but it was the most like off weird thing of like their whole thing of like it was like all these models like walking into a house with all the launch games. They're like playing PS2 in the pool. You're like, what the fuck are you doing? But like you said, it was just like the art. So coming to this thing and like walking through the DVDs and like how this was gonna work and what the launch lineup was. Like holy shit! And I remember that was one like I kept forever, and I took it with me on October 26, 2000 to wait in line, or October 25th to wait in line for the midnight launch, right? And me and my friend Adam just passing it back and forth, reading it, and like fantasizing about watching
what's
fucking
be
Ghostbusters and special features.
Yeah. Oh my god, like that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Just think about it. And for me, it was the 100th issue of EGM. I think that will go down in history as the most important thing to ever happen to me as a gamer and for who I am today.
Yeah.
Because they did the top 100 games of all time list in that. And now lists are fucking everywhere.
Sure.
Like that. It's like IGN has a top 25 list every 2 seconds about games. But to me, that was the first time I'd ever seen lists, video games ranked.
Right.
And like, here's the 100 best games of all time. And that must have been 1998 or 9, maybe 99 when it happened. And I read that thing back to front or front to back to front, any which fucking way.
Yeah.
So many times that those 100 games became embedded in my memory of like, oh shit, these mean something to video games. And I was young at that point that I missed out on so much stuff. Final Fantasy didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know what it was. Like all the shit, then to look through and to see them review or to see how high Final Fantasy 6 was or Final Fantasy 7 and to see that where they like that was why I played Super Metroid. It was the number 2, I think, on that list. And it introduced me to all these different games. Like I had just played Mario. I just played like core Nintendo games. And to see the history of video games in that perspective, I was like, holy shit, like I need to get in on this. And then slowly I went through and played the majority of those games now.
Yeah.
What about you, Colin?
From like the late 80s to like the mid 90s, Nintendo Power was my jam, and those were really special times. Although when you look back and realize that Nintendo Power was basically just a mouthpiece, I think we remember Nintendo Power a little too fondly, to be honest. And it's not to say they were dishonest. It's just to say that I feel like they focused a lot on the positive and not necessarily the negative.
But I mean, that's Nintendo, and like
but we didn't. But it wasn't clear when you're a kid really that Nintendo owns this magazine. Like that Nintendo puts this magazine out and stuff like that. And it was fine because I didn't really give a fuck anyway. I loved that magazine and I still have some of them, but I used to rip them apart and like put things on my wall from them once in a while. I just had like all these ads on my wall, basically of like great Nintendo games, like and just I remember random ones like I had a Snow Brothers ad on my wall, so I'm like, why do I know this?
That's what I missed the most about these magazines. Was how good the ads were.
God, the ads were different.
Yeah,
the ad I remember the most for some reason is a later ad that was in EGM and EGM2, which was the Gex one with the with the car and the hot chick.
The spandex.
Yeah. But yeah, by the mid '90s, so I had Nintendo Power from. I mean, my brother got it. Like the Mario 2 one and the Castlevania ones were really the early ones, so it was very beginning. All the way through, I would say, I don't know, I remember getting Donkey Kong Country and, I don't know, it's probably like 95, 96, around N64. And then EGM I liked because it was agnostic, so I could learn a little bit more about the things that I didn't have, even though, and kind of learn about why I should ridicule my Sega playing friends and stuff like that. And then EGM2 I really loved a lot because, and EGM2 was actually, when I consider how I got into the industry, and I got into the industry more writing technical documents and facts and stuff like that, EGM2 was super instrumental in that. It made me love strategy and stuff like that, and strategy guides. Because EGM2 was all about tips and tricks and stuff like that.
Then there was Extreme Gamer. Was that what the other one was? That was the strategy one?
I don't remember.
Did EGM2 become that? I don't know.
Maybe it did. EGM2 went away eventually. I remember getting something in the mail. Yeah, I remember getting something in the mail being like EGM2 is no longer a thing. And I remember like what if it was another magazine or whatever. And then I got for 2 years in the late 90s Next Generation, which was really, really good. It was like very high quality publishing and stuff like that. And it was more insight into more like the stuff that I ended up writing, I guess, actually, later on. So I guess that was pretty influential. And then I remember very clearly my friend Steven, who I played hockey with when I lived in New Hampshire, had a PS1. before I did, and he got the first issue of PSM, which was the Final Fantasy VII issue, if I remember correctly. And I remember being at his birthday party. I think it was like 7th or 8th grade, and I guess it was 7th grade. And I was flipping through it, and was it 7th grade? No, I guess I was going to 8th grade actually. And I remember flipping through it and being, this is awesome. It had the lid cover of the smiley face and all that kind of stuff. I took the thing out of it and subscribed, and I got PSM from issue 2 to, so that was 97 to 2004, 2005. So that was the magazine I probably got the most. And I stopped even reading it probably. I just got them. Yeah. Actually, I think at some point they just kept sending it to me. I don't even remember renewing that after a while. I think I probably paid them $30 in total. And got
PSM was super cheap. It was $10 for 2 years or something because it was just
Adelaide. And plus they had the websites, and that was Imagine Media and stuff like that, I think. So that was it. But I mean, by 97, 98, I was reading pretty much all my game news online. So it was a matter of just having this supplemental thing you can bring on car rides and shit with you or whatever. Because you were talking about E3 and all that kind of stuff. I don't remember ever being surprised by E3 after 1997. I didn't
have a computer, and a lot of the people I knew, my age group didn't have computers. So it's to us, we still didn't hear about these games until I mentioned Wind Waker and all that stuff. That was what, 2002.
Wind Waker was
no, that would have been right because I was already living at the Antler House.
Yeah,
it must have been 2003. Yeah,
2001 was when GameCube came out. Mm-hmm. So, it's I'm sure that stuff was all over the internet then, but it's that didn't mean anything to me. It might as well not have existed.
That was the thing. We talk about old media, new media, how magazines died out and stuff. I didn't even realize it was happening at the time though, because I was that guy who had EGM every month, and then Game Informer, and then I picked up stuff at the supermarkets, and then that all washed away. You know what I mean? I remember how important it was to me that I switched my EGM mailing address to Mizzou. You know what I mean? Because those were friends coming with me, and I wanted that experience and that taste of home. But I was all over IGN at that. I mean, IGN really came to prominence for me with PlayStation 2 and the run up to that, where every day in computer lab or whatever the fuck that class was, I'd click over and read it, and they had the countdown clock of how close we were to PlayStation 2 and stuff like that. But EGM, I hung in there till it was all said and done, because that was a staple. But it was, by the end, a quaint staple, right? Of I've read what reviews do they have early and what reviews do they have extremely late. Yeah. That was always the game, right? Of they're gonna be ahead on some and way behind on others.
Yeah, that's the nature of the publishing, I guess. I feel I remember getting Nintendo Power again in college specifically to get that Zelda disc for GameCube, and then I just canceled it because you had to get it.
Yep.
And I was like, well, I guess I have to do it. And I'm glad I did, because I wanted that really bad. Real bad. But the late 90s was the rise of Merc channels and fan sites and stuff like that, and I felt I was awash with fucking game news at that point. I was reading random sites that don't exist anymore. Some of them do. One of my favorite sites when I was a kid was basically just a lot of the various niche RPG role playing and strategy sites. There's a lot of them, and so I didn't even really read or like IGN until probably the turn of the century, where I was where I was reading some of the bigger sites, because I was so invested in this subculture based on MIRC and all this kind of stuff, where people would point you in different directions to find different websites that were just run by a few people in their spare time. And I think some of these websites kind of still exist, and there was something very personal and very cool about it.
You felt you were in something. You were in this club.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I felt it was something very very enjoyable and very intimate, and kind of what we're trying to maybe do with this. It's almost, I guess what I'm saying is, it's almost what's old is new again, because I feel like the internet's almost reverting back to that, where people would rather have a more intimate relationship with a few people and something a little smaller, and not these megalithic websites that really can't please everyone and seems to please fewer people as time goes on, because they're looking for their little communities that they can kind of latch onto. And I think I was very much like that in the late 90s. And it's so funny to talk about it, because it was a fucking long time ago. You know?
I feel like it, but it was. Man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking 17 years ago. You know, I mean, that's an incredible amount of time, but I was so immersed in just video games. And I remember how cool it was when my dad got me my own phone line, so I had a 56K modem on my Sony Vaio, and I remember that I didn't have to disconnect, and I would stay online forever. And I remember I used to obsess over. I used to be on AIM, and I'd have my own name on my AIM list, and I would obsess over how long I was online. And sometimes I'd be able to stay on for months, without getting disconnected. And And you would just have like your MIRC windows open in your ICQ window, which I don't even know if anyone uses ICQ anymore. Do you remember ICQ? It's like a messenger, like a personal messaging system that was based on like digits instead of names, and all this kind of stuff. And like just obsessing over like you leaving your away message up when you were gone at school, and then coming back and seeing if like anyone from these various sites message you and all. I don't know. It was a different and closer knit community, and then I kind of segued over to GameFAQs, and that's kind of how I found my way here.
GameFAQs, man, that was it for me. This makes me think I want to find the 100th issue of BGM. We should do a topic where we look at the top 100 games.
Oh, sure.
Because it'd be interesting to look at what the top 100 games in 1999 were. It'd be very different than a top 100 list today.
Oh, yeah. God damn.
Maximum Cortez asks, did you ever rent consoles from rental stores? I also want to give a shout out to him. He drew this awesome fan art of me as Ash.
Oh, with the Pokeball.
Yeah, and it looks fucking legit. But yeah, did you ever rent consoles?
No, I didn't.
I want to say I rented a Nintendo console at some point, but I don't remember what it was. I remember really, really, really badly wanting to rent the Game Boy Advance when it came out and had Fire Pro Wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was a launch game.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. Yeah, and I was like, I don't know if I want this console, but I want to play that game so badly. And I was going somewhere. I forget where.
Were you a Fire Pro fan? Did you even know what it was at that time?
I was a big wrestling. I'd imported it before. Yeah.
Because
I was always on the hunt for a great wrestling game.
Yeah, it was that I remember like yesterday that Game Boy Advance launch because I got it the day it came out and the Arctic White.
Yep.
GBA
Pro Skater 2.
I got what did I get? I got Castlevania, Circle of the Moon, obviously, Super Mario Advance, which was Mario 2, and then the Dodgeball game. It was Super Dodgeball.
Oh, Dodgeball, yeah.
That was a good launch, man. There was a Rayman game.
Yeah, it was a great. Actually, that's what I was kind of thinking in my mind. I'm like, that might be really. I still think that. I know people think I'm crazy that pound for pound, the Vita launch probably had the best games. I remember when we talked like there was a lot of just great games for the system. It didn't matter. But I look at Game Boy Advance and I'm like, there was actually a really solid lineup of games where I remember buying that and being like, this is pretty awesome. And GBA is underrated. I think it came and went a little too fast because the DS kind of came and they wanted to have that 3-pillar thing, and then the DS ended up just destroying everything. So I really, really was. I remember getting the clamshell too when Pokemon Ruby came
Sapphire,
out.
Yeah.
And
clamshell was awesome. That's when I jumped on and actually bought one.
Well, it was a mind changing kind of thing for me because I remember what being so revolutionary about that was charging it.
Yep.
And I was like, this is so fucking cool. Like I don't have to buy batteries anymore. I was going through batteries like fucking crazy on my Arctic White like the flat GBA. So
no headphone jack. That was some bullshit.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, you had to buy like a proprietary thing, right?
Yeah.
But I remember it was just so compact, and I remember going to Target and buying it, and I was like, this is kind of fucking cool, man. And I don't know that
man. Oh, God.
Yeah, the backlight was everything, especially because it's so juxtaposed to Circle of the Moon, especially was so dark. On that, like it was, you couldn't fucking see that game. I'll never forget that as long. I remember playing like under a lamp. Be like, this is so fucking dark. Like, how are you supposed to play this game? And those problems were solved with the inclusion of a backlight, which was you could only do when you can charge the system. So it was kind of an ingenious way to go because at that point we were charging our cell phones and we were kind of getting used to that sort of thing. So, I really am very fond of the Game Boy Advance, and I don't feel like a lot of people talk about it anymore. It was the death of the Game Boy. So
that is a great lineup too. When you go back and look at all the games that came out on it,
a lot of great role playing games.
Definitely.
And I still say that I know some people think I'm crazy. I still think the definitive version of Final Fantasy VI is on GBA, just because it was portable and it was tight and it's how we remembered it, and it wasn't on the fucking PS1. I hated that fucking version. It wasn't as bad. Chrono Trigger was the really bad one on PS1. I remember. I'll never forget that as long as I live. How disappointing that was.
I rented a PS2 during the launch weekend from Blockbuster because I knew
how'd you get your hands on it?
I knew the people at Blockbuster,
Gotcha.
and like it was definitely like a thing where I knew that I wasn't gonna get that system. Like I didn't get a PS2 until the time around when Onimusha came out, so it was like
spring 2001.
little bit later.
I think right, yeah, spring 2001, because Onimusha 2 came out summer 2002.
Yeah. So I remember renting it, and I got Fantavision and Street Fighter.
Was it
Alpha
EX?
Or EX, whatever the hell, and I was just like, oh god.
Fantavision Fantavision I don't think is that bad, but that was what was so funny is that PS2's launch sucked.
Yeah.
And like
so
and like
bad,
and what was so
Smuggler's Run.
Smuggler's Run was good.
Oh, SSX was rented, so I couldn't get it.
And Smuggler's Run and Madden were the standouts because like Madden looked so real. You couldn't believe how real this fucking game looked. Yeah.
Yeah. What I remember about the PS2 launch was because I got my PS2 the day it came out. My mom bought it for me, and my birthday was right before it. So the agreement, as I've said before, was that it would be my birthday present and my Christmas present. And the only way you can get a PS2 at GameStop, which was EB at the time for me, was you had to buy a console, a warranty, a controller, a memory card, and a game. It was $500. And I remember my mom being like, "This is a lot of money. So if you want this, this is all you're getting." I was like, "That's fine." And I remember back then you could bring I can't believe we still could we could have done this in the 90s and early 2000s. And you guys probably remember you could just bring back your games like after a week and just opened and played and just be like, "I don't want this anymore." And they would take it back. And I remember I did that for the PS2, not to be a dick, but like probably 4 times because I'm like, these games suck. You know what I mean? I think Genji or whatever was one of the first games I got. Then I think that was what it was called. Then I ended up with Summoner, and I'm like, oh, fuck. I fucking hate this game. Because I was looking at the lineup. I was such a role-playing game nerd, and I'm like, there's nothing here for me. Like, there's nothing I want to play. I ended up with Smuggler's Run, which was fine, but and NHL 2001, I guess it was. Right? Yeah. Or maybe 2002, so I don't know what the fuck it was. 2001, yeah. It would have been one. And they were fun, but I was like, the PS2 launch had the highest volume of games because there was a lot of games, and none of them were good. Yeah, that's like what I remember the most. I was like, "There's nothing here." Like Fantavision's a first-party game. Like I can't believe they didn't just. And From Software made a few of those launch games that sucked, which a lot of people don't know. And now they're famous for Dark Souls and stuff. But I remember that launch being so voluminous, I guess we'll call it, but not rife with quality. Sure. While I would have preferred a launch more like PS3's where there were good games plus third-party games, and then PS4's launch I think was even better. Yeah. So
for me it was Silent Scope. I remember hemming and hawing. Do I want Silent Scope or Madden? And I was like, I'll get Silent Scope. And yeah, I played it that first day, and I went back to the store. I was like, please give me Madden.
That's so fun.
I can't believe I remember doing that with I remember doing that with Beyond the Beyond. I remember doing that with Saga Frontier, which I fucking hated. I hated that game. I was so disappointed in that game because I think when I bought Final Fantasy Tactics, they advertised that game. I would buy anything that had Square on it for like years. Anything.
The Bouncer?
I liked The Bouncer. That was actually one of the first. I know people don't like that. Was one of the first PS2 games I thought was actually good.
I remember trying to force myself to like The Bouncer, and I just couldn't do it. I was like, damn.
It wasn't bad. It was stylish. The PS2 took a long time to burn. It really wasn't until Onimusha came out that we had. I think Onimusha might be the first really great game for the console, and then it kind of came into its own in 2002. But at that point, what was funny about the PS2 was I had by the time GameCube came out, PS2 was there, and I played a lot of it, but I was like more into the GameCube, and the GameCube just had better games. Like period. Like I just think that the GameCube was like so strong, and so I would play the Grand Theft Autos and a lot of games on PS2, but I was all about that fucking GameCube, man. And PS2 could have had me probably more. I expected the PS2 to have its hooks in me a little bit more than it did, considering how poor that launch lineup was. And it was they launched it on hype, and in fact, it was a DVD player. It didn't matter. Yeah. It was very similar to the PS4, where it didn't seem like it mattered. Yeah, what was on it? It was just like people were just buying it anyway. I was like, all right, cool,
they're excited.
Yeah, and then actually, the first great game was Metal Gear Solid 2.
That's what I was gonna say. Mm-hmm. But it's just because Onimusha, I remember being divisive, right? Like I wasn't super into it, but Adam Brown I remember loved it. You know what I mean? But like Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty was the one where everybody was like, "This is amazing."
And that was 2001,
fall 2001.
Yeah, so
GTA.
And then GTA 3, which was before Metal Gear. That was September or October, right? And then Metal Gear was November.
That sounds right. Like I think it was October then November.
And then so I remember and then that was around time when GameCube came out. So it was then it was all about Smash and stuff like that fall. That Christmas season, I don't know, man. And then I remember, I don't know why I remember it must have been like August 2002, around there, July 2002, when I think Super Mario Sunshine and Onimusha 2 came out the same day.
And wasn't that in August?
It was probably somewhere in there. And I remember my dad picking them up for me and being really mad that I told him to go to the mall. I'll never forget it. But I was like, I want those games. I need those games.
I need it.
And then I promptly wrote a FAQ for Sunshine.
Yeah, I remember getting Sunshine.
That was 13 years ago.
The day it came out from EB.
I'm so old. We're so old. 13 years ago that Sunshine came out. Holy fuck.
That's crazy.
What a game.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Please come back every week, whether or not you think it's worth $1. I'll always think it's worth $1.
It was worth $1 today. We had a good time.
Yeah, I think this was a good one. This was a good one. This is the shortest Q&A section. Well, not the shortest. This was a long Q&A session, but only 2 topics, 2 questions. We went off on them.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let me reiterate. Don't name your kids after characters that are still active.
I think here's the I got hung up on it too because you kept saying I don't understand what's so ridiculous about it. What's so crazy about your statement about or what is it, Khaleesi? However, because she's got 15 fucking names in this goddamn
Daenerys
book.
is her name, right?
I didn't want to get into it. I don't want to get into all her fucking stupid names. What I'm saying, the funny thing about this is you keep comparing it to Judas, which is a story not every kid, but lots of kids learn and know. I don't think 7-8 years from now on the playground, all these kids are going to remember Game of Thrones. The parents might be like, "Oh, Khaleesi, like the Game of Thrones thing," and I don't.
Like that awful woman.
Oh, the one who punted the babies in the sky.
I don't know.
I think George Railroad Martin really phoned it in there. I just think
you got to be cautious. I like the idea. Like I said, I think there needs to be more creativity with names. Absolutely, and I love people taking inspiration from anything, like from books or whatever games. But you got to be careful.
Real question is,
real careful.
How since the rise of us. Podcast Beyond, Kind of Funny. How many kids have been named Shuhei?
I don't know. In Japan?
No,
a lot of them.
In the States.
I don't know. I mean, that's a very
Shuhei Moriarty.
That's a very interesting question because I wonder. Yeah, Shuhei Moriarty. That'd be interesting.
A lot of Tobuscus too of it.
Tobuscus. Yeah, there probably is. PewDiePie's running around.
The bigger question I'm wondering is if one of our viewers is indeed named Judas.
Let us know. Send us photos of your IDs. Actually, just mail us your passport.
Let us know in the comments. Let us know in the comments below. Because is that a name that's used? Have you ever known a Judas?
No, I've never known a Judas, but I have to imagine somebody's named Judas. Some parents are like, "Fuck it."
If your name's Hitler, let me know too, because that's weird. Yeah, I know, but like,
shut up,
doesn't matter.